Please go ahead, Sister Yumna.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brother Jamaluddin. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Yumna Admani, and I'm a counselor from Mombasa, Kenya, currently studying Islamic counseling psychology at Al Balad Academy online, alhamdulillah. Kenya chapter and my team, I welcome you all to the first ISIP lecture series, and ISIP stands for International Students of Islamic Psychology. My colleague, Brother Yusuf Ali Osman, will enlighten us about ISIP, inshallah. Brother, please.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
My name is Yusuf Ali Osman. I'm a counselor based at the Family Resource Center at the Jamia Mosque, Nairobi. I'm also an Islamic religious practitioner, Da'i. I'm also Iraqi. I have been in Ruqya practice for the last 18 years.
Mashallah.
I'm also a certified professional mediator dealing with diverse mediation issues, including marriage and divorce. Currently, I'm a student of Islamic psychology enrolled with Al Balagh Academy, UK, doing mental health, gene possession, and Islamic psychology, Islamic marriage counseling, Islamic addiction counseling, and the art of dream interpretation. Now I'm very honored to be part of the task force of the ISIP Kenyan chapter, which currently has about 17 task force members who work behind the scenes to put together such events like the one we are having today. The need for Kenyan chapter is to familiarize Islamic psychology and spread awareness and knowledge to benefit the Kenyan people at large. The lectures will be carried out in English and Swahili for convenience, as well as other indigenous languages whenever such opportunities arise. Just like the international body, the Kenyan chapter will look to connect with people with diverse backgrounds interested in Islamic psychology. I will also look to disseminate knowledge, share resources, and discuss best practices in a free and accessible manner. Not without much ado, let me share with you a short presentation highlighting the International Students of Islamic Psychology.
You want to share your screen, Ustad Yusuf?
Yes, and to share my screen.
Yeah, of course. I think you have access to it, Ustad Yusuf. I think I made you co-host, so yeah.
Yeah, so let me share the screen now. Yes. Is my screen visible?
Yes, Ustad, it's perfectly visible.
Yes, yes. Now, this is the ISIP, International Student of Islamic Psychology presentation. As you can see, the mission statement of the ISIP, that is Islamic Institute of Islamic Student of International Psychology, is an inclusive space designed to connect people with diverse backgrounds interested in Islamic psychology. ISIP aims to disseminate knowledge, share resources, and discuss best practices in a free and accessible manner. ISIP is a platform to enable further development of people's personal and professional interests, studies, and understanding of Islamic psychology within their communities and countries of origin. The vision statement of ISIP aims to bring about passive well-being for all human beings through a revival and promotion of Islamic psychology. ISIP aims to revive the heritage of a well-rooted Islamic tradition and provide the basis of indigenous Islamic approaches within the realm of psychology. ISIP envisions the normalization of Islamic psychology throughout the world and eliminating stigma, addressing mental health issues. ISIP aspires to facilitate a variety of head healing practices and modalities that adhere to principles of Islamic psychology. For now, about us now, that is international students of Islamic psychologies, members are from 90+ countries with a diversity of ages, race, languages, all over the world. And it is open to professionals and students. And also anyone with interest in Islamic psychology is also very welcome. Because now it is a paradigm shift from the so-called mainstream psychology to Islamic psychology, which is more holistic. So the ISIP was formed in 2021 by our founder member who is here. We are glad to have him today, and we are honored also to be hearing from him with the vast experience and knowledge he's got about it. Right now, we have current initiatives whereby we have digital library, blog, and educational resources, all geared towards enhancing knowledge of Islamic psychology. ISIP, with its current initiatives, has gone regional also with local chapters from different countries of the world in Europe, US, United States of America, in Africa, South Africa, West Africa. And it's narrowing down to countries that we've seen on the websites like Ghana. We have now Kenya, which alhamdulillah, we have the honor to have our brother today who will be initiating it officially. As you can see now, YouTube subscribers in our channel have reached 6,000+, and it's counting. And I believe soon it will surpass by far. It will even quadruple this number as we work behind the scenes in order to ensure Islamic psychology reaches each and every nook of the earth. Lectures have already offered up to date is more than 120, and it is continuing. And we hope Kenyan chapter will increase also to that number. And if you want to contact international students of Islamic psychology, the contacts are here, the email address, you have the YouTube and the Facebook also. For now, I'd like to take it back to Yumna so that she can be able to welcome our esteemed guest today, Brother Jamaluddin Miri. Thank you very much. Sister Yumna.
Thank you so much, brother. So as we start off our meeting today, inshallah. So inshallah, today's lecture is going to be about Introduction to Islamic Psychology. I would request all of you to please mute your mics as the lecture is going on, inshallah. So questions can be asked in the chat section or in the end of the session, inshallah. No recordings or screenshots allowed, please, as this lecture is recorded and it will be put in the YouTube Zoom link. Sorry, it will be put in the YouTube link of ISIP, inshallah, later on. So today's speaker, our esteemed speaker today, is Brother Sayyid Jamaluddin Miri. He is the co-founder and the director of ISIP, that is International Students of Islamic Psychology. He is also the co-founder of Al-Balkhi Institute and Shifa Institute Scandinavia and Fatwa Academy of Sacred Manhood. He is also the co-founder of Nasheed Academy of Islamic Artists. Additionally, he is a licensed counselor with GPI, Gothenburg's Psychotherapy Institute, and has studied social psychology, industrial and organizational psychology at Lund University, Sweden. He also holds a postgraduate diploma in Islamic psychology from Cambridge Muslim College, UK, and is trained in traditional Islamic integrated and psychotherapy level 1 and 2. He is currently pursuing his master's program in clinical psychology at Lund University, Sweden. Please let's welcome Brother Sayyid Jamaluddin Miri. Thank you. Welcome, brother. Thank you.
Jazakallah khairan, Sister Yumna. Jazakallah khairan, Ustad Yusuf, for this beautiful presentation. Honestly, I'm just a student of psychology like all of you, so I'm sure I'm going to learn more from you than what you guys will learn from me. So please feel free to share your expertise with me as we grow this Kenyan chapter together. Fizibilillah, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and for the sake of reminding ourselves that the best person to learn from how to embody health and well-being and balance is who? Our messenger, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I'm very honored and very pleased to be with all of you. As students of knowledge, we are very pleased to be connected with hearts and soul from all over the world and ummah. And I'm very excited of working to further strengthening Islamic psychology in the Kenyan context and region through ISIP's Kenyan chapter with Sister Yumna and Ustad Yusuf and rest of the task force members of ISIP Kenyan chapter, and with all of you who have joined today. You're all more than welcome. It's an honor to be with all of you. I want to send my salams to all of you. So I'm just looking of all the names. So salam to Melhi, salam to Samoye, salam to Ustad Yusuf, to Sister Yumna, salam to Muhammad, salam to Hamza, salam to Nusrat, salam to Rayana, salam to Shabnan, mashallah, salam to Yasir, salam to Ismail, salam to Muhammad, salam to Fawzia, salam to Muazzam, my brother Muazzam, nice to see you here, mashallah. Salam to Hidia, salam to Aisha, salam to Ma'alim, salam to Hanuna, salam to Aida, mashallah, beloved colleague from Norway, and salam to Aliyu, salam to Tuba, and salam to Idayat. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah wa alhamdulillah wa salawat wa salam ala rasulullah wa alihi wa sahbihi wa min wala. So let me share my screen, dear beloved brothers and sisters. So we will start the lecture now, inshallah. Hope you guys see my screen. Does everybody see my screen?
It's clear.
All right,
Yes.
Ustad Yusuf, thank you. MashaAllah, Ustad Yusuf, you have such an excellent background in Nairobi, MashaAllah. 18
Yes,
years
brother, you can see
serving
it.
the Ummah. We see the screen? Okay, alhamdulillah, shukran. So I'm very delighted and very honored to be with all of you, brothers and sisters. And honestly, we've been praying that more people will join ISIP all over the world. And we'll be praying that we need to have the paradigm shift when it comes to, could you mute yourself, please? Somebody has the microphone on. If you could just mute yourself, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. So essentially, the time is very ready for us to strengthening Islamic psychology in the East African region. And we've been strategically working hard from the international level to have representation all over the world. It's very important for us. And we have so much to learn from the sacred tradition in our deen in West Africa and East Africa and North Africa and Southern Africa. Some of the greatest scholars in Islamic psychology came from the African continent. And this is very, very sacred history that we need to revive and remind ourselves about. Within the tasawwuf tradition, within the akhlaq tradition, within the kalam tradition, within the tib tradition, within the fiqh tradition, within the usul al-fiqh tradition, many of the great scholars came from the African continent. And this is something that we're very honored to learn from, and also to be with all of our beloved Kenyan brothers and sisters. Now, we have a lot of members joining from all over the world, so most welcome as well to this lecture. Today, what I will do, brothers and sisters, ustadas, is to speak a little bit about the introduction of Islamic psychology. And I will try my best to conceptualize what is Islamic psychology. And Islamic psychology is a very broad field. So there's a lot of different ways of approaching psychology from an Islamic paradigm. I would try my best to shed light on different approaches as well, inshallah ta'ala. So my background, as I mentioned, as Sister Yumna presented, is this, so we don't need to go into that. And we can start by speaking about what is Islamic psychology. And by the way, throughout the whole session, please write your questions in the Zoom chat, and I will be happy to address it at the end of the session, inshallah. So essentially, Islamic psychology finds its roots in the Quranic worldview and the prophetic example as embodied by our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Islamic psychology at its core is looking at the human being in a holistic manner and examines and approaches human behavior, motivations, emotions, and healing through an Islamic lens. All right. Islamic psychology centers on the concept of fitra, the soul's connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our natural disposition of tawheed, and bringing the human being back in touch with its fitra for true well-being. And the metaphysical components of the ruh, the soul, the aql, the mind, the nafs, the lower self, and the qalb, the metaphysical heart, are key components of influence and study in Islamic psychology. So have in mind that nafs can mean different things. Nafs can also mean soul sometimes, but for this presentation, I'm using nafs as the definition of the lower self. And of course, the nafs has different levels, and this is something we're going to go back to throughout the lecture. Also, Islamic psychology is rooted in the primary sources of Islam, which is the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And of course, a lot of the works that we're doing in this contemporary era is also grounded in the secondary sources, which is the works of our traditional scholars, like, for instance, Imam al-Ghazali, Imam al-Qayyim, Imam al-Ibn Miskawayh, Imam al-Razi, and many other traditional scholars, Abu Talib al-Maki, etc. There is also different ways of looking at Islamic psychology. You can approach Islamic psychology from a top-down approach or a bottom-up approach. And what do we mean with that, dear brothers and sisters? So, for instance, there is a way of approaching psychology which we can call Islamization of psychology, right? What is Islamization of psychology? It's more a top-down approach in the sense that you're trying to filter, for instance, mainstream psychology or Western psychology from an Islamic lens, all right? So you're trying to look at, for instance, cognitive behavior therapy, CBT, and you're trying to, address it, apply it, reflect upon it from an Islamic lens. And you're using things from other traditions, for instance, mainstream psychology, which is applicable to the Islamic paradigm. This is Islamization of psychology, right? So for instance, I'm engaging with cognitive behavior therapy, let's say, all right? And CBT, by the way, is quite congruent with the Islamic paradigm. Now, I'm engaging with it by seeing which components in cognitive behavior therapy is congruent or applicable to the Islamic paradigm, and which components in cognitive behavior therapy, as an example, is not congruent and is not applicable to the Islamic paradigm. So essentially, this is Islamization of psychology, right? And this is a top-down approach. It's not developed from an indigenous approach, because Islamic psychology, as we speak about, is actually rooted in the Islamic paradigm. It's derived from the Islamic paradigm. So it's a more bottom-up approach. This is indigenous approach towards psychology, indigenous Islamic psychology, or as our traditional scholars used to call it, ilm al-nafs. And it's rooted in the primary and secondary sources, which I referred to in my earlier slide, in my previous slide, which is the Quran and Sunnah, primary sources, secondary sources, the works of our traditional scholars, all right? Then there is also a comparison model, which is essentially to compare Islamic notions with other traditions' notions, whether they're equivalent or not, all right? So these are three approaches that we can say that people in this contemporary era are utilizing as a way of understanding the science of the soul, which is psychology, right? From an Islamic point of view, top down, bottom up. All right. So It's also interesting to refer to when we speak about, for instance, Islamization of psychology, then there is also a terminology which is called IOK, which means Islamization of knowledge. And this is a movement that started 70, 80 years ago, actually. And one of the great scholars in the Islamization of knowledge movement was Ustad Imam Ismail Raji al-Faruqi. He is one of the great scholars of last century. And I'm sure many of you know who Ustad Sheikh Ismail Raji al-Faruqi was. He spoke about IOK as a way of recasting the whole legacy of human knowledge from the standpoint of Islam. All right. And when he was speaking about Islamization of knowledge, dear excellent Ustads, brothers and sisters, participants of this lecture today, when he was speaking about Islamization of knowledge, he was speaking about 7 steps of how you could go forward in applying Islamization of knowledge. And these 7 steps are: step 1, creation of understanding and awareness. We need to be aware of why we are working with Islamization of knowledge. If you can mute your microphone, please. Could you mute your microphone, please? Thank you. So essentially, the first step of Islamization of knowledge is to understand why and have awareness for it. This is very important. Why am I doing? What is the awareness of it? Then is to crystallization, to speak about crystallization of Islamic thought, concepts, and methodologies, to understand the essence and the gist of Islamic thought, concepts, and methodology. The third step, according to Faruqi, is mastery of the legacy. We need to understand the legacy of Islamic thought and have a mastery about it. The fourth step is mastery on contemporary knowledge. So for example, brothers and sisters, if we are going to work with Islamization of psychology, we need to understand, for instance, what is the contemporary knowledge within the field of psychology. We need to understand what is psychodynamic therapy, what is cognitive behavior therapy, what is compassion and focus therapy, what is acceptance and commitment therapy, what is logotherapy, what is humanistic psychology, what is behaviorism or rationalism, or all these philosophies, right? We need to have a proper knowledge and mastery of contemporary knowledge and sciences. Then it's important to establish textbooks in disciplines. So we need more textbooks, for instance, in Islamic psychology, right? The sixth step is priorities of scientific research. What should we do research? Which focus should we have? Which aim should we have? Which topic should we research about? And the final step, according to Sheikh Al-Faruqi, is preparation of academic headers, scholarship, training grants. So we need resources. So this is what he advocated about when it came to Islamization of knowledge. Another important, dear brothers and sisters, if you can just mute yourself, I would really appreciate it. It will be easier for me to conduct the lecture. Jazakallah khairan, an honor to be with all of you. So another important scholar who advocated Islamization of knowledge is Sheikh Naqib al-Atas. And I'm sure many of you know who he is, one of the great scholars of last century. According to al-Atas, with regards to contemporary knowledge, referring to IOK, he referred to IOK, Islamization of knowledge, as the deliverance of knowledge from its interpretations based on secular ideology and from meanings and expressions of the secular. All right. So he advocated a 2-steps model with regards to Islamization of knowledge. The first step is isolation process, where knowledge should be freed from Western culture and civilization. Let's be honest, dear brothers and sisters, even though you can find in Western academia today that they say that we're objective, that we are objective in our research, in our studies, that's not fully true, because the epistemological tradition is rooted in secularism today, and previously rooted in the Judeo-Christian notions. So psychology, even though they say that it's an objective science today, most of the philosophies and approaches, how much the Western academia wants to advocate that it is neutral, it's not neutral. Neutrality is actually something quite interesting to reflect upon, because in all honesty, neutrality doesn't exist, because everything is shaped by its context. This is worth reflecting upon. So what we see as psychology, which is today in academia claimed to be the neutral science, is actually rooted, at least the mainstream psychology today, in the Judeo-Christian notions, and later on rationalism and humanism and ideologies who shaped the way that we are studying psychology in academia today, even in Muslim countries, honestly. And what then Al-Attas is speaking about is that we need to know where the knowledge is derived from, what is the epistemological reality of this knowledge, particularly, let's say psychology in West, and then free it from it, filtering it, and understand that this is a relic, this is a creation of that context. If we look at, for instance, I'll give you an example. Freudian theory, all right? Sigmund Freud, I'm sure most of you know who Sigmund Freud is, and he's the creator of psychoanalysis, right? So he is raised in Vienna in Austria 200 years ago, right? And the whole, discipline of psychoanalysis is a creation of his context and of his ideology. He was secular, he was quite anti-religion, all right? He criticized the Judeo-Christian notions of that time as something that, created, in his view, pathology amongst the clients he met, right? And from there, he started and he created his, psychological school, which is psychoanalysis, all right? Now, most of modern scholars today actually criticizes even psychoanalysis as not being empirical, all right? There's a microphone open. Could you please mute the microphone? I would really appreciate it. Thank you. So even though modernity today is criticizing psychoanalysis, it's still interesting when we reflect upon it that it's not a neutral discipline. It's shaped by a person who has an agenda, and it's shaped by a context where the person was raised and born in. So Vienna during the 19th century was a place where this movement started by a person who was secular, who saw religion as something pathologizing people, right? And this was a reaction. The whole Western psychology today, which became the science, psychology from the Greek etymological root word means, psyche means soul in Greek, and logy means science. So psychology used to, even in West, before the Renaissance and before modernity, this modern era, used to be the science of the soul. Because psyche means soul in Greek, and logy means science. But after the secularization process of West, it turned into being a science of behaviors and inclination, the science of the nafs and cognition, science of behaviors and cognition, sorry. Psychology today has become the science of behaviors and cognition, the science of nafs and aql. They disconnected and rejected fully the ruh, which is the soul, right? So today in West, at least, it's not the science of the soul anymore. And there is a reason for that, because psychology, as we see in modernity and Western academia and also mainstream psychology as a whole, is a reaction that came from the Judeo-Christian notions of well-being, of virtuous behavior. In all honesty, the Judeo-Christian notions of virtuous behavior is not fitri. It's not natural. That's why Islamic psychology has a more holistic approach, because our psychology is very natural. A virtuous behavior in Christianity could be, for instance, not to be married. So you have people that are monks that are considered to be virtuous in their behaviors, and one of their virtuous behaviors is to never get married. All right? In Islam, this is not a virtuous behavior, because in Islam, we see marriage as part of the ibadah. It's an ibadah to get married. You see what I'm saying? So psychology came as a reaction to the Judeo-Christian, non-fitri, non-natural viewpoint of human reality and human existence. For instance, in the Judeo-Christian notions where Freud grew up with and where he saw what religion was, because he never saw Islam. He didn't have relationship to Islam. The relationship he had for religion was the Judeo-Christian notions, which is quite frankly non-natural, non-fitri, and the virtuous behaviors are, for instance, not to get married. Oppress your emotions, your energies, your natural energies. While Islam sees it differently, as long as it's according to Sharia, all right, it's actually ibadah to get married or even to engage with certain emotional feelings, as long as it's according to Sharia, God's will. Then it's actually virtuous to get married or engage with certain emotions, as long as it's according to Sharia. That's our furqan, that is our benchmark, right? So psychology, as we see in mainstream psychology today, Western psychology, is a reaction of the Judeo-Christian notions of religiosity, which is not natural, it's not fitri. You're born with a sin. In the Christian notion, you're born with a sin. In Islam, we're not born with a sin. We're born pure. We're born with the notion of fitra, which is our natural disposition towards what? Tawheed. So we need to understand this when we work with Islamization of knowledge, that psychology, as we see today in mainstream psychology, is a reaction of this non-fitri notions of Judeo-Christianity, which then psychology, as we see today, they reacted on it and they disregarded all spirituality because they thought spirituality is connected to the Judeo-Christian notions, which is non-fitri. And then they disregarded everything, at least in some of the movements within mainstream psychology. There are some movements in mainstream psychology that are not anti-spirituality, but I'm just generalizing just to prove my point, all right? So what Al-Attas is speaking about, dear brothers and sisters, is that we need to understand that knowledge, as we see, is not neutral. Even though Western academia is claiming that, yeah, this is empirical, but it's not neutral because it's based upon an epistemological reality. That's just the facts, so nobody can say it's a neutral. So we need to take the knowledge and free it from the Western culture civilization. Okay, psychoanalysis came from Vienna. It was reaction from the non-fitri Judeo-Christian notions. At the same time, the founders were all seculars, So we free it from that. That's the isolation process. The second step that Al-Attas speaks about is after isolation, those existing body of knowledge should be infused with Islamic elements. So let's say we're doing this filtering process of isolation. We're looking at, let's say, I take as an example, acceptance and commitment therapy, which is a modality in third wave CBT, third wave cognitive behavior therapy, is actually a very beautiful modality within mainstream psychology that I actually think is very congruent to the Islamic paradigm. So you're looking at ACT, you're trying to look at it. Okay, which things needs to be freed from, from things that are not congruent with the Islamic paradigm within this modality. Okay, you contemplate about that, you reflect upon that, and then you filter it. And then the things that you keep, let's say in acceptance and commitment therapy, which is congruent with Islamic paradigm, then you infuse it with Islamic elements. For instance, acceptance and commitment therapy speaks about accepting that you're going through pain, trauma, and trials and tribulation. Acceptance is actually part of the Islamic way of looking at trials and tribulations and bala. We accept when we go through the phase of bala, trials and tribulations. We try to find meaning in it, which is exactly what acceptance and commitment therapy speaks about. And then what we do in this second step of Islamization of knowledge, according to Al-Attas, is to infuse it with the Islamic elements, which I try to do right now as we are reflecting upon, for instance, the modality of ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy. There is another scholar, dear brothers and sisters. His name is Professor Uthman Najati. He was an Egyptian scholar born in Sudan. And please, brothers and sisters, let's make dua for all of our beloved brothers and sisters in Sudan. They are going through a lot of suffering right now. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring ease and sakina, tranquility and prosperity back to all of our beloved brothers in the beautiful country of Sudan. In ISIP, we have a lot of members from Sudan, so we pray for them, inshallah. Ameen, ya Rabbil Alameen. Professor Uthman Najati he spoke about 6 steps of Islamic psychology. He believed that a critical step in building Islamic psychology as a discipline lay in the deep knowledge of the Islamic intellectual heritage. To have deep knowledge, according to Najati, served 6 important functions. 1, it allows Islamic psychology scholars to utilize and draw upon contributions that span the course of 15 centuries. You know, dear brothers and sisters, Islamic psychology is nothing new. Since the days of the Sahaba, Muslims have been reflecting upon the soul, the reality of the soul, how to treat the soul, the levels of the soul, well-being, mental health. All these notions have people in the Muslim heritage and our tradition, they've been reflecting upon them for over 15 centuries. So when we speak about Islamic psychology, we need to look at this tradition, because this is accumulative knowledge. We build upon each other's knowledge. This is the Islamic tradition. It's an accumulative process. We build upon each other's work. You see what I'm saying? And everything is rooted in Quran and Sunnah as the first source and the main source. The second step, according to Najati, is that when you work with Islamic psychology, it's important to understand that it bridges a historical gap frequently found in the writings of modern psychology historians who tend to bypass the Islamic civilization. Honestly, dear brothers and sisters, my beloved brothers and sisters from Kenya, and my beloved brothers and sisters from all over the world, if you read, let's say, the Oxford Encyclopedia of Psychology, do you think that you will find a lot of Muslim scholars there that Oxford Encyclopedia recognizes as contributors to the development of the field of psychology? You can answer yes or no in the chat. I don't see the chat, but let me see if I can see the chat. How many people think that these, mainstream psychology encyclopedias mention great scholars within Islamic tradition that has provided knowledge in the field of psychology? Feel free to write in the chat.
It overlooks them.
Exactly. You won't find a lot of mentioning of, for example, Imam Ghazali, Al-Razi, Ibn Sina, Al-Farabi, Al-Kindi, Ibn Miskawayh, Al-Maki, Al-Tusi, Al-Isfahani, and the list, Al-Balkhi, and the list goes on. Abu Zayd al-Balkhi, rahimullah, he is a Persian Sunni Muslim scholar, born in the city of Balkh in Afghanistan, in modern Afghanistan. He's the founder of CBT, cognitive behavior therapy. And why we know this is because Professor Malik Badri, the father of contemporary Islamic psychology, rahimullah, he translated some of Abu Zayd al-Balkhi, rahimullah's work from Arabic into English, maybe 10, 15 years ago. These mainstream psychology encyclopedia doesn't recognize this. So that's why we need to work with Islamic psychology, because Najati says that then we're actually filling the gap founded in the writings of many mainstream modern psychologists who bypass Islamic tradition. And this is also part of the colonial tradition of psychology. Colonialism and psychology had a connection with each other because they used psychology as a way of oppressing the indigenous people of the lands that were colonized. So the third step is also to build upon psychological knowledge that was produced by Muslim scholars and Muslim communities. The fourth step, it exemplifies approaches exerted by Muslim scholars to reconcile Islamically driven knowledge and knowledge acquired from other cultures and tradition. A lot of our scholars historically, they were also knowledgeable in other traditions. The Greek tradition, the Persian tradition, the Chinese tradition, the Indian tradition, the Roman tradition. They were experts. And you know how they actually could engage with other traditions without going astray? It's because they were always first and foremost rooted in the Islamic paradigm, in Quran and Sunnah, which allowed them to even show curiosity to other traditions as well, because they were rooted. They were rooted. They knew what to do, what to not do. They knew that I can engage in this way and listen and read, and I will not go astray because I know what Quran and Sunnah says. I know what is applicable. I know what is not applicable. It's very important to know that curiosity is important as long as you're rooted. If you're not rooted, then curiosity can become assimilation and you can go astray. But if you're rooted, it could become integration and you can find common denominators. So this is something that the traditional scholars were experts in, and they could easily, disregard or even, refute ideas that are not congruent to Islamic pattern. The fifth step, it allows for the development of a holistic understanding of human being, because Islamic psychology is holistic. It takes into account all aspects of our well-being, both in the horizontal level, which is the dunyavi level, and the vertical level, which is the ukhravi level. All right. Finally, it complements the psychological truths derived from the Quran and the Sunnah. So this is the sixth step emphasized by Professor Uthman Najati, rahimahullah. Now, let's look at the conceptualization of psychology from the Islamic perception, Islamic psychology, according to the model that is taught and advocated by Dr. Abdullah Rahman, which is one of my teachers. He's also an advisory board member of ISIP. Would you please mute your microphone, please? All right. So do you guys hear me now? I think I'm not muted anymore, right? All right. So this model is a very beautiful model, and I really recommend you guys to engage with it because it definitely shows the holistic approach of psychology from an Islamic perspective. So in the middle, you find the four components that we focus on when it comes to speaking about psychology from an Islamic paradigm, which is the qalb meaning the metaphysical heart, the aql, which means the mind or the cognition. Now, it's not easy to translate from Arabic to English, honestly, brothers and sisters. It becomes quite reductionistic because aql is much more than just mind and cognitions. But for lack of time, and just to make it a little bit simple, let's say that aql means cognitions and mind, all right? Nafs is the lower self, our behavior inclination, even though it can mean soul as well, by the way. But in this model, we see it as the behavior inclinations, the self, the ego. The ruh is the soul, all right? So this is the four components that constitutes psychology from Islamic paradigm, all right? So on the lower circle, which is the red circle, you see that the nafs could easily be afflicted by shaitan and the waswas, the whispers of shaitan. All right. And that's where we always try to fight, right? The waswas of shaitan. A lot of the clients that come to us, as practitioners, they might come because they have some behavior inclination towards things that doesn't elevate your soul to come to a state of serenity and closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the waswas of shaitan. And we try to help them to not act upon the waswas of shaitan, right? So the nafs is afflicted by that, right? And in the dunyavi realm, which is the red circle, you have shaitan's waswas, you have hafla, which is to forget about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to not live a life where you're in a constant state of tafakkur and tadabbur of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's, jamali and jalali, attributes. And then when you're in this red circle, which is the dunyavi circle, then you're in a state of nafs al-amara bil su, the nafs that is inclined to evil, all right? And you're acting upon the muhlikat, which is the vices in your behavior and character traits, all right? Well, when we want to work with our nafs, to elevate our nafs, we can do that through different spiritual and psychological practices, like jihad al-nafs, fighting the nafs, fighting the behavior inclinations that are taking you astray, that are just rooting you in the dunyavi realm, and it's not elevating you to be in the ukhravi realm, right? You do jihad al-nafs, and you can do tazkiyat al-nafs, which is the purification of the self, right? And then maybe you can elevate your nafs from being in the state of amara to come to a state of mutma'ina, which is the serene self, which is in the ukhravi realm, in the fitra realm, which is presence to be serene, to be close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be connected with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the blue circle on the upper end of this, picture, fitra. All right. And then you have the qalb, the metaphysical heart, which is the center of health in Islamic psychology. We put the center of health with the metaphysical heart, the qalb. This is where the center of health is. In order to be in a state of health, you need the nafs and the aql to be in balance with the heart, the qalb. The qalb will be in charge of the balance. And within the qalb resides what? The ruh, the soul. And the ruh, as you see in this picture, is in the ukhravi realm. The ruh is connected to fitra because fitra is imprinted in our ruh. What is fitra? It is our natural disposition towards tawheed. This knowledge and notion is imprinted on our ruh, on our soul. All right? And when we are in balance, when the qalb is in charge, and the nafs is in a state of mutmainah, and the aql is also in balance with the nafs and with the qalb, which is in charge, then we are connected with our ruh. We are always connected with our ruh, but now the ruh can be fully vital, and then we are in a real serene connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because the ruh is the vasila, is the connector between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The ruh is the connector, the vasila between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All right? So this is the conceptualization. The red circle, dunyavi, the blue circle, ukhravi, the blue circle, fitra, the red circle, hafla. All right? The blue circle connecting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, reminding us of akhirah. The red circle connected to shaitan's waswas, very much in the dunyavi, in the worldly realm, And then our traditional scholars, they were studying psychology from the Islamic paradigm through different fields, different disciplines. So the tasawwuf tradition, which is, we can call it's connected to ihsan. So if you look at the hadith Jibreel, the Gabriel hadith, defines our religion, Islam, into three I's. Iman, Islam, and ihsan, right? Iman being, our faith, Islam is our practice, and ihsan is beautification. So tasawwuf comes from the ihsan, the third eye, which is how to beautify myself, my character, working with my character. So practices like tazkiyat an-nafs was something that the tasawwuf scholars reflected upon, and they wrote manuscripts about that, or jihad al-nafs, or tahdib al-akhlaq, for instance, which is refinement of character. So the tasawwuf scholars, they were concerned with how to treat the metaphysical heart, and they focused on that. Also, if you look at the fiqh scholars, the jurists, those who were engaged in Islamic jurisprudence, they tried to do research to understand how can we preserve the aql, the mind, to let the mind be sound and solid and not distorted. That's the contributions from the fiqh tradition into the field of Islamic psychology. If you look at the objectives of Sharia, maqasid al-Sharia, the greater aims of Sharia, one of the maqasid, the objectives are to preserve our aql, our cognition, our mind. So fiqh offered studies to understand psychology from Islamic paradigm, focusing on the aql mainly, but not only the aql, it could even be the nafs, by the way. Then a lot of the scholars from the kalam tradition, which we can, call applied theology, they reflected upon, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, reflecting upon the realities of this world, and through that also reflecting upon how that affects psychology as a field. The akhlaq tradition, which is the Islamic ethics, the ethicists, they worked a lot with how to understand how we can refrain from vices and add virtues into our behaviors, into our characters. So for instance, tahdib al-akhlaq, refinement of character, is something that the akhlaq scholars, the ethicists of Islam, try to study and find, applications of what we can do to become better Muslims and create a better well-being in our psychological well-being, you know. And they did that through different practices, and they tried to reflect and study that and conceptualize that. So this model is a very good model to understand which traditions, which disciplines within the history of Islam has contributed to the development of Islamic psychology. All right, let's go to the next slide, dear brothers and sisters. So Islamic psychology is interdisciplinary in its nature. All right, as I referred to in the previous slide. The intention and the paradigm, the Quran and Sunnah. So the paradigm is Quran and Sunnah. The intention of all the disciplines and the scholars was the same. They all wanted to understand the Sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's law, systems and structures in all of creation and the concept of our soul. And the prophetic tradition also encouraged scientific endeavor. So this, I'm sure all of you have heard this hadith where the Prophet ﷺ has said, the word of the wisdom is the lost property of the believer. Wherever he finds it, he is most deserving of it. So this type of hadith and sayings of our beloved Prophet ﷺ allowed the scholars to go into the scientific endeavor of understanding the science of the soul, the structure of the soul, the well-being of our soul, etc. This created cohesion amongst a wide range of specialists from different disciplines. In contrast to Western psychology, where different schools are in odds with one another, for instance, behaviorism is in odds with psychoanalysis, etc., that was not the case with the Islamic scholars. Even when the Islamic scholars refuted each other's theories, they did it with husn dhan, positive assumption. Hence, they were not involved in character assassination or were dismissive of their opponent's work. Rather, they engaged in it. And in today's terminology, dear brothers and sisters, we could call this peer review and fact-checking, which is a common routine in contemporary scholarly work as well. So in a sense, dear brothers and sisters, we as Muslims were the ones who created peer review and fact-checking and even empirical research, subhanAllah. All right. Scholars in sciences and scientific fields that contributed to the field of Islamic psychology historically were, for instance, philosophy, which you can find the works of Al-Kindi and Ibn Sina, child psychology, Al-Tabari, cognitive therapies, Abu Zayd al-Balkhi, medicine and tib, Al-Razi and Ibn Sina, psychotherapy, Al-Razi, sociology, Al-Farabi, social psychology, Al-Farabi, or even Ibn Khaldun. We could use him because he's he is also a social psychologist in a sense. Akhlaq and etiquettes, Ibn Miskawayh, Tasawwuf, Ibn Arabi, Imam Ghazali, Aqidah, Imam Ghazali, and the list goes on. So, Tasawwuf, spirituality or ihsan, fiqh, jurisprudence, tib, medicine, and akhlaq, ethics, Islamic ethics, are some of the disciplines that help to shape what came to be known as the discipline of ilm al-nafs. But Islamic psychology as conceptualization of the human being could be found in all of the Islamic sciences. So let's go through some of the sciences that shaped what we call Islamic psychology today. Fiqh. So fiqh and Sharia were important in the creation of ilm al-nafs because they deal with the divine law. A branch of this science that is becoming more developed is what I referred to earlier, is the maqasid al-Sharia. The overarching aims of the divine law are, for instance, as described by Imam al-Ghazali and also by Imam Shatibi, is protection of religion, that's one of the aims, life, health, property, and dignity. Specifically, the two objectives of protection of health and religion are important to our psychological well-being. Fiqh is also concerned with the human actions as they relate to the divine judgments, which is Sharia. Fiqh is important because the rules of God can only be recognized through the prescriptions or judgments outlined in fiqh and jurisprudence. How do we perform our ibadah? What shall we refrain from? From an Islamic psychological point of view, it is imperative to know what is right, good, or wrong, bad, when it comes to rulings concerning human actions. So that's why fiqh is so important in the development of Islamic psychology. Another discipline that has shaped Islamic psychology, as I referred to earlier, is tasawwuf. Tasawwuf was important in the creation of ilm al-nafs because it deals with the sincere intentions on turning towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. By doing so, we could do tazkiyat al-nafs, purification of the soul. Tazkiyat al-nafs is the process of purification and is attributed to a person's perfecting their intentions and actions by doing things in addition to the minimum requirements, hence ihsan, unification, right? Tasawwuf in itself is a process of realizing ethical and spiritual ideals. In order to be successful in this process, you need to know what constitutes your soul, which type of diseases deviates your path towards Allah Azza wa Jal, how to find moderation and equilibrium, and how to bring yourself into a state of normality. Imam Ghazali, for example, believed that closeness to God is equivalent to normality, whereas distance from God leads to abnormality. Imam Ghazali, one of the great scholars within the science of tasawwuf, listed some of the spiritual diseases such as fame, status, self-centeredness, lust, ignorance, envy. He also detailed a therapeutic model of the opposites to break the grip of these evil traits and bring the person back to equilibrium. For example, deal with ignorance with learning. Deal with self-centeredness with khidmah and servitude. For example, Imam Ghazali's view on diseases were that they could be categorized into two categories, physical and spiritual. He was not a physician, so he focused more on the spiritual diseases. And in his Ihya Ulumuddin, the revival of the religious sciences, you can find him stating that he will let the physicians deal with the physical components, as those are not part of his realm. And this takes us to the third, discipline that also shaped the science of the soul, ilm al-nafs, Islamic psychology. So tib, medicine, as a field, did also provide significantly to the field of ilm al-nafs. So both Abu Zayd al-Balkhi, al-Razi, and Ibn Sina came from the medical field. Al-Balkhi in particular stressed the fact that you could never disconnect the psychological from the physical, and actually was criticizing the colleagues of his era in his manuscripts for not putting enough time in analyzing the psychological state of the patient and how that affects his or her illness. Brothers and sisters, honestly, if you listen to al-Balkhi's criticism of physicians of his time, 1,000 years ago, isn't it relevant for our criticism of modern medicine today? I actually think so. Because modern medicine today doesn't think about the soul, doesn't focus on the soul, doesn't focus on the psychological or the spiritual state. It's all about the physical components. So it's very reductionistic, it's very mechanistic, and it's very allopathic. Sorry. What does allopathic mean? Allopathic medicine is a medicine that just wants to work with surgery, remove the symptom. It doesn't want to focus on why the symptom even was established at first. This is allopathic medicine. And this is unfortunately the medicine that is normalized in modern medicine today. Take aspirin, that's it. It's not about understanding why you have headache. Imam Ghazali sometimes, when he reflected upon melancholy, for instance, he said that melancholy could be something good, because that's something that might detach you from dunyavi needs so that you can focus more on your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So modern medicine, the criticism that Abu Zayd al-Balkhi has back then is actually quite relevant the criticism that al-Balkhi had towards physicians of his contemporary era is quite relevant for the criticism that we could have for medicine and the way that it's conceptualized in this era as well. Another discipline that shaped the field of Islamic psychology is the akhlaq tradition. Akhlaq, etiquette, and tahdib al-akhlaq was important in the creation of ilm al-nafs because it focuses on the reformation or refinement of our character, which help us to purify our metaphysical heart, which in turn is the major component of our soul and well-being. Tahdib al-akhlaq, however, is specifically concerned with redirecting blameworthy character traits and adopting praiseworthy ones. How to erase vices and replace them with virtues. So the concept of morality preached by, for example, Ibn Miskawayh, rahimahullah, was closely related to problems with the soul. So for instance, muhlikat and munjiyat. Muhlikat means vices and munjiyat means virtues. So in the Islamic tradition, we always focused on development of a good character, as said by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that I have only come to perfect character, right? So the vices that we always wanted to refrain from was, for instance, lying, envy, arrogance, conceit, anger, lust. And the virtues that we wanted to adorn ourselves with was, for instance, honesty, humility, chastity, God consciousness, etc. Then we have also the concept of takhliya and tahliya. Takhliya is to rid oneself and work on eliminating the things that are haram and makruh. Tahliya is to adorn or take on those beautifying things from the prophetic example and character traits. So in the akhlaq methodology, one is to work on takhliya first and then tahliya. In fact, the command to rid ourselves of negative characteristic is not something arbitrary, dear brothers and sisters. Our noble Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam emphasizes in numerous ahadith the encouragement to engage in takhliya. For instance, no one with an atom worth of arrogance will enter paradise. And the heaviest thing on the scales on the day of judgment will be good character, husn al-khuluq. Now, let's reflect a little bit, brothers and sisters, upon modern psychology and its perspectives. Why we need to reflect is because as the Islamization of knowledge movement told us, if you look at Al-Faruqi or Al-Ataz, Nasiha towards us, is that we need to understand the contemporary knowledge as well. So, what is modern psychology? It's very rationalistic. What does it mean? Reason and intellect is the only source of knowledge. They don't believe in Wahi. They don't believe in revelation. It's all about reason and intellect. It's very mechanistic and mechanical. Man as the machine. As I mentioned to you guys, allopathic medicine looks at the body as a machine. Okay, you have some problems with your chest. Let's do an operation and give you a new chest or a new arm or a new hamstring. It's not about understanding the root problem of things. So man is as a machine. It's also very rooted in scientism, which means that only the empirical accounts, only the empirical counts. Everything else, such as the metaphysical realities, is rejected, right? And René Descartes, which is one of the main rationalist philosophers and the father of rationalism as a movement and philosophical ideology, he used to say, I think, therefore I am. I think, therefore I am. And the whole idea of I think, therefore I am has shaped modern psychology. Because today, if you look at cognition, because psychology today is the science of cognitions and behavior inclination. It's all about thinking. Is your thinking right or wrong? Is your thinking sound? Let's do cognitive behavior therapy. Let's do, let's try to reframe your thoughts. I'm not saying that this is not bad or good. I mean, it could be very valuable sometimes. But is our whole existence in us thinking that we are existing? It's quite reductionistic, actually, to think that I think, therefore I am. That's the only reason I am. And that has shaped the whole modern psychology as a field. And that is also connected to the Cartesian dualism, which is the separation of intellect, aql, body, jasad, and jism, and soul, ruh. So modern psychology distinguishes intellect and body and dismisses the soul completely, all right? And this is contrary to the etymological Greek basis, which I referred to earlier in the presentation, where psyche in Greek means soul and logos means doctrine. If you could mute your microphone, please. Please, thank you. Could you please mute your microphone? All right, thank you. So these type of philosophies has shaped modern psychology as we speak today. It's also reductionistic, right? It's almost like the part is autonomous. So aql is by itself, you know, the body, the jism is by itself. The emotions, the ihsas is by itself. While we as Muslims, and from the Islamic psychological paradigm, we believe that the part is a part of a larger whole. Hence, that Islamic psychology is holistic, because the qalb is connected to the ihsas, which is connected to the jasad, which is connected to the ruh. That's the holistic part of Islamic psychology. Also, which I referred to earlier, psychology today is very allopathic, which is biomedical, to treat symptoms and diseases with medication or surgery. How often do we see clients being sent to a psychiatrist to just get medication as a way of, you know, fixing your depression or anxiety? And by the way, I'm not against medication, not at all. I'm just against the fact that we think that medication is the only solution. And that's the problem with modern psychology in many ways, modern psychiatry in many ways. It's all about medication, medication. As Muslims, we actually believe in medication sometimes. I mean, we are the one who created medication. In the traditional Islamic hospitals, or as referred to in Arabic, Darul Shifa, the house of healing, or in Farsi, in Persian, Bimaristan, the house of the sick. In these traditional hospitals, we used to have pharmacies. We used to create our own, you know, medicine, you know, pharmacology. We were the first to create pharmacology. So as Muslims, we're not against medication. But what the problem is with allopathic medicine is that they only believe in medication. We believe in combination. Sometimes you need medicine, sometimes you need talk therapy, sometimes you need, you know, to engage more in spiritual practices. I mean, our brother, Ustad Yusuf, he is a Raqi. So, you know, you need to go to Raqi to, you know, for him to do some ruqya on you, you know. So our view is holistic. The allopathic medicine only see medication as the solution. Also, modern psychology is very much influenced by behaviorism, the behavioral. So, for instance, animal behavior can explain human behavior. SubhanAllah. This is quite shocking. If you look at behaviorism and its theories, they used to do a lot of experiments with rats. That's very reductionistic. So they're looking at rats' behavior and they're applying it on human beings. That's very reductionistic. And what behaviorism believed in was that only what can be controlled is what is worth studying. So intangible things like the soul or dreams should not be studied or incorporated into explanations of human behavior, motivation, or development. Behaviorism. It's also shaped by psychoanalysis, which I refer to Freudian theories. Man is governed by desire and lust. So man is this animal who is only governed by desire and lust. All right. And to summarize, modern psychology is a reaction to the Judeo-Christian narrative, and narratives like original sin shaped modern psychology to refrain from religion, because the view of religion in West was not that fitri, because it was rooted in the Judeo-Christian notion. The vicegerent, you know, one vicegerent versus man as vicegerent. So in our religion, we believe that all men and all women are vicegerents of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on earth. While in some aspect of the Judeo-Christian notion, they believe in one vicegerent only, which is the Pope. right? Fitra as being an imprint of sin. So in the Christian notion, you're born with the sin. So you're not born in a natural disposition, in the pure disposition, which is fitra, you're born with sin. And this is an unnatural morality, dismissing natural human dispositions, which I referred to earlier with, marriage as something that in Islam we actually engage in, we encourage, because this is ibadah, if it's done according to Sharia. While if you want to be virtuous in some movements within Christianity, then you should refrain from marriage, then you're a virtuous person. So this is, psychology is a reaction on this. Brothers and sisters, I don't have so much time to continue this presentation. There's a lot of things that I could say. This is some examples of how we can actually engage with modern mainstream psychology from a top-down and integrative approach, Islamization of psychology, Islamization of knowledge, because just because we criticize mainstream psychology doesn't mean that we cannot engage with mainstream psychology. I'm trained in mainstream psychology. I'm a licensed counselor. So we're not against engaging with other tradition or engaging with mainstream psychology. Well, we should do it mindfully. I repeat, we should do it mindfully. We should always connect it back to Quran and Sunnah. What is applicable, what is not applicable. And when we do it mindfully, there is a lot of wisdom in many approaches in Western mainstream psychology as well. And these are some of the things that I'm mentioning, that acceptance and commitment therapy is actually in line with some of the views of Qadar Allah, predestination, and Sabr and patience when it comes to dealing with trials and tribulation. Humanistic psychology or positive psychology or third wave CBT acknowledges some notions of transcendence, but does not take you out of the realm of the nafs, because they don't believe in God. It's about feeling good, but it's not about feeling God. It's about being good. It's not about being God, being with God, astaghfirullah, sorry, being with God. So it's about being good and not being with God. So yes, there are some commonalities, but it still doesn't take you the whole way to the holistic approach, which is Tawheedi in Islam, right? It's good to be good, but what does it make sense if you're good without having God into the calculation, right? Or being with God. All right. These are some other reflections of how we can see commonalities between, for instance, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm sure many of you who are psychologists or psychiatrists or psychotherapists or counselors or chaplains, you have studied Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And actually, Maslow, he was from the humanistic movement within psychology. And a lot of his reflections and theories is quite, congruent with the Islamic paradigm. But if you look at the left, pyramid, that's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. He only takes you to self-actualization, which is achieving one's full potential, including creative activities. So achieving one's fullest potential, including creative activities. It's still in the nafsani realm. It doesn't take you beyond the nafs, right? To the right side, you can see the hierarchy of needs, but what Islamic perspective could add is self-transcendence, which is the peak experience. So after self-actualization, which is the fifth hierarchy of needs according to Maslow, we have a sixth step from an Islamic point of view, which is self-transcendence, orienting goals and motivations beyond the self. So yes, we can engage in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but it's not fully compatible with Islamic paradigm because we have a sixth step, which is self-transcendence, to come beyond the self, to come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I'm just going through a little bit how we can engage with psychology, both from down, which I just showcased to you guys. How can you engage with ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy? How can you engage with different modalities within third wave CBT and positive psychology, right? Then we have the comparison model, which is to compare with, Islamic tradition, Islamic psychological tradition with other psychological tradition, all right? This is a very problematic thing sometimes because we cannot compare, you cannot compare Islamic paradigm with a paradigm that is not rooted in Tawheed. And if you do, it's a slippery slope. You can easily go astray. And I'm just giving you, for instance, a quote from a website where they speak about Sufi psychology, all right? And they're speaking about it in a way where they are taking away Sharia. It's nothing to do with Sharia. It's nothing to do with fiqh. They just take something from the Islamic tradition, and this is called cultural appropriation and secularization of spirituality. Because there is a movement today in the world where they're taking things from religious tradition and secularizing it. So for instance, in positive psychology, you can find some notions of Imam Ghazali's work, for instance, with vices and virtues. But what they have done is that they take it away from Tawheed. They take it away from, things that, people that are from the secular world do not want to engage with. They don't want to engage with Sharia. They don't want to recognize Sharia. This is secularization of spirituality, which is very problematic, And this is cultural and religious appropriation of things where they take away certain things from its root. So let's read this, this quote together. It says, Sufi psychology is the science of the soul. It is a way to expand the current limitation of psychology to encompass the entirety of all human beings. As Sufism is a discipline in self-knowledge, it directs each individual to know his or her innermost self, the self which is not much more than simply thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and social labels. It is a method to reacquaint each individual with their true identity, the I, which is the source of strength, resilience, joy, and peace. In doing so, one moves past the habitual patterns of behavior, repetitive thoughts, processes, emotional reactivity, and limiting belief to discovery, harmony, balance, and joy from within. As a result, outward relationships with family, friends, and community are also improved. Sufi psychology reminds individuals that there is more to them than just their situation and circumstances, and encourage exploration of the true identity. They're not mentioning anything about Tawheed. They're not mentioning anything about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're taking something from the Tasawwuf tradition and they're secularizing it. So they're putting it into the dunyavi realm. Yes, it's good. You can be a good person. What about being close to God? Imam Ghazali would never agree with this type of way of looking at Tasawwuf. Never. And this is why comparison model could be a slippery slope and very tricky, because then you're seeing people are taking things from Tasawwuf. People are taking things from other part of the Islamic tradition and they're secularizing this. And when I read this quote, it was not Muslims who wrote it, by the way. I could see it. Or if they were, it's not Muslims that are oriented with Sharia, because there is no haqiqat without Sharia. This is something Imam Ghazali and many of the Tasawwuf scholars used to speak. There is no haqiqat without Sharia. There is no truth without Sharia. You need to have Sharia there. So brothers and sisters, engaging with comparison model is very tricky, and we need to be very aware and very cautious when we speak about Islamic psychology, because Islamic psychology, whether it's derived from the disciplines of fiqh or tib or tasawwuf or akhlaq, needs to be rooted in the Quran and Sunnah, hence why I'm emphasizing Sharia. So the former quote, their definition of what defines Sufi psychology is quite similar to Maslow's notion of self-actualization and self-transcendence and the Western approach towards mindfulness. A lot of Western modalities today speaks about mindfulness, dear brothers and sisters, but it's only focusing on working with the inner self to be good with yourself, not to connect yourself to the extensive self, which is to bring yourself closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't find that in Maslow's notion of self-actualization. And you don't find it in that definition in the previous slide of what these people who have appropriated Sufism call it Sufi psychology. It's not rooted in coming closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is the secularization process of some of Islamic tradition and practices, which is very problematic. And we cannot just compare Maslow without being very cautious of what is congruent and what is not congruent. And we cannot just see something and take it from Islam and take it away from Sharia and think that's how we can use it. It doesn't work like that. There is no mention of the fundamental aspect of tasawwuf and Sufism, which is to reconnect yourself with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what they have done essentially is to neglect all 4 stages of tasawwuf, which is Sharia, Tariqah, Haqiqat, and Marifat. Further, their definition of what defines Sufi psychology is quite similar to Maslow. Yeah, I already spoke about this. Now, this is one of my last slides. Islamic psychology, the iceberg model, which is the model that Dr. Rothman and Dr. Coyle has emphasized. All right. This is the iceberg model of Islamic psychotherapy. All right. If you look at the iceberg, dear brothers and sisters, this is very interesting. Western psychology and the secular spirituality, which is very problematic. How can you secularize spirituality? How can you secularize religion? How can you secularize Tawheed? How can you secularize traditions within Islamic thought like tasawwuf and akhlaq? You can't, because all of this is related to Tawheed and to Sharia, right? So if you look at Western psychology, it only addresses the nafs, which is the behavior inclination, and the aql, which is the cognitions, all right? What Islamic psychology does, we go to the deeper level of our well-being according to this iceberg model under the waterline, all right? We also work with the qalb, the metaphysical heart, and the ruh, the soul. And we try to find ways of opening up the doors with the keys that could reconnect you with your ruh, which is your wasila towards your Lord, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and bring about holistic well-being for you. So Western mainstream psychology focuses on behaviors and cognitions, while as people who want to practice Islamic psychology, we focus also on the emotions and on the spiritual states, which could resolve a lot of the blockages that doesn't allow you to reconnect with your heart and with your soul. This is a very beautiful model that you can utilize. All right. The bottom-up approach, which is indigenous approach towards Islamic psychology. It's founded in our Islamic paradigm. Primary sources and secondary sources shaped the psychology, which is Quran and the Sunnah, and also the works of our traditional scholars like Ibn al-Qayyim or Imam Ghazali. It's an accumulative work. We build on from the work of our traditional scholars, so it's accumulative. It's also working with all 3 dimensions, which is the body, mind, and soul, heart. It's holistic in that sense. It's deriving from the 3 eyes of Hadith Jibreel, which is to work with your iman, to strengthen it. It's all about Islam, to utilize it, the spiritual practices, and of course, ihsan, beauty, which is connected to tasawwuf, right? Beautification, strive for the beautiful and for perfection in one's worship, is addressed by concepts such as tazkiyat al-nafs, mujahada al-nafs, riyadat al-nafs, and it's connected to the soul. So the first eye, which is iman, are 6 articles of faith, right? It's about the intellect to understand the 6 articles, and it affects your heart as well, right? Islam, which is our spiritual practices, the 5 pillars of Islam, shahada, salah, zakat, saum, hajj. These are also addressed by Sharia, which connects to your body, but also, of course, your mind and all these things. And ihsan, which is, the beautification, is connected to the soul and heart. So the 3 eyes of Hadith Jibreel is connected to both the intellect, the aql, the body, the jasad, and the soul, the heart, the qalb. Body, mind, and soul, heart. So we can look at psychology from this bottom-up approach by looking at the 3 eyes of Hadith Jibreel and connect it to our psychological well-being. All right, brothers and sisters, there is a lot of things I can say. I don't know where to stop. I think I need to stop now because time is going. Perhaps, if I may allow, just to take this last slide as well. As Muslims who want to apply Islamic psychology from a bottom-up approach as mental health professionals or counselors, etc., it's also important to understand from the Islamic point of view, when we look at disease, your brothers and sisters, we need to always know that disease has both the primary causation and a secondary causation. And mainstream Western psychology, they only focus on the secondary causation. We as Muslim, we believe in a primary causation as well when it comes to diseases. And what is that? That all disease comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Everything comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We need to accept this fact. The secondary causation is what aspects and stimuli have led to the condition, like for instance, anxiety, depression, poor sleep habits. And then you try to resolve those to bring the person back to the state of health and moderation and balance. But we know that all diseases and all health comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Both the disease and the solution for the disease comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Imam Ghazali, in his Kimyat al-Sa'adat, which is the summary of the Ihya Ulumuddin, he criticizes the doctors of his time, which I referred to earlier, for focusing only on the secondary causation. They only diagnose melancholy, right, and prescribe medicine, instead of perhaps seeing the depression as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's way to make the client's interest in dunya less and the worldly less prevalent, which could facilitate a greater inner spiritual seeking and contact with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is exactly the same criticism that we can have to modern medicine and modern mainstream psychology today. So we need to go back to the primary causation of things, dear brothers and sisters, in order to work with psychology from a bottom-up approach and from the indigenous Islamic psychological approach. All right, brothers and sisters, I have more things to say in my lecture. Maybe next time, Ustad Yusuf and Sister Yumna, I can speak about the clinical application of Islamic psychology and psychotherapy. Maybe I can speak about that next time, because I have a whole lecture about how we can take all these theories in Islamic psychology and apply it in a clinical setting and in a clinical way, the application of the theory. I digress right now. I will stop my presentation. Please forgive me for any shortcomings in my presentation. If I said anything wrong, please forgive me. I always say that I'm a person with a lot of flaws in my character. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that. And if anything good came from my presentation, it's all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and all the mistakes are solidly mine. I'm just a student, such as most of you, and I'm trying to learn together with all of you. So this is just partially of things that I learned and things that I learned in my studies and in my clinical work, but I'm basically just a student, and I seek your prayers and your forgiveness for my shortcomings. Thank you so much for listening. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for tawfiq in our comment on the word to normalize the field of Islamic psychology, rooted in the Quran and Sunnah, rooted in our sacred tradition, rooted in the fiqh tradition, the tib tradition, the akhlaq tradition, tasawwuf tradition, and other disciplines that shape this beautiful science. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our efforts. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept the normalization of Islamic psychology in Kenya, in East Africa, all over the world. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us success. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring peace, serenity, and healing to all brothers and sisters all over the world that are suffering due to mental health issues. Jazakallah khairan. I'm very open to all of your questions, and I will leave the floor to Sister Yumna and Ustad Yusuf to take over again. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Once again, thank you so much, Brother Jamaluddin. It's been an amazing presentation by you, alhamdulillah. Very enlightening one. I'm grateful to be here with this platform with you, alhamdulillah, and everyone together. Hopefully we have benefited from this, alhamdulillah, inshallah. Khair, barakallah feek. And inshallah, any questions anybody has, they can ask through the chat, or inshallah through directly, Brother Jamal.
Yeah, they can open up the microphone, Sister Yumna, if they want. I'm perfectly fine with that.
All right, so you can unmute yourself kindly, and you can talk to Brother Jamaluddin and ask the questions, inshallah. Khair. Thank you.
Any questions, brothers and sisters? Question about the presentation? Any questions about Islamic psychology generally, even applying it, or studying it? I'm happy to be at your service, inshallah.
Brother Jamaluddin, some brothers are asking whether you can share the slides.
Yes.
The presentation, yes.
I just need to fix it a bit, because this lecture is actually two parts. So one is about the theory, so the history, the development, and the theory of Islamic psychology. The second presentation is how to apply it in clinical practice. And I give some cases how I work and how you can work with Islamic psychology in a clinical setting. Inshallah, we can have a second lecture. I'm sorry, I just need to drink some water. So I've been speaking for the whole day. But yes, inshallah, I can share the slides. I just need to fix them a little bit. Any other questions?
Thank you very much, brother, for that.
Barakallahu feekum, Ustad. Maybe you can start by asking a question, Ustad Yusuf, and then people will be engaged. Because I think it's good with some Q&As.
Yes, brother. Actually, there were questions, 2 questions in the chat. Maybe I can read them through.
Of course, actually, somebody's asking in the chat. So while you read through, let me see. So Miss S is asking how to integrate Islamic psychology and meds. Essentially, Sister S, I don't know what your name is, so Sister S. As I mentioned before, we're not against medication as Muslims. Like, we're not against it. It's the problem is, and this is not my own, thoughts. This comes from my teachers and from the traditional scholars. The problem is when you think that medication is the only solution. All right. And this is the problem today in modern psychiatry, for instance. It's all about medication. It's not about understanding where does this, state of health come from. So for instance, if we speak about OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, most research says that a combination of medication and actually talk therapy could be good in helping a person who has OCD. And, as Muslims, we can have a lot of clients who have like religious OCD, right? Where, they are, afraid that their wudu is breaking all the time. They do wudu extra often. And, they redo their, prayers all the time because they think that they haven't done it correctly, etc. This is quite common, actually. I have several clients who have religious OCD. And what my teachers have recommended and what I also recommend is a combination of medication. Now, I'm not a doctor, so if they need medication, they need to go to a psychiatrist, right? And I have a lot of colleagues who are psychiatrists, and then I can work with them with talk therapy. And I'm actually trained in how to work with, OCD from an Islamic psychological point of view. So integrating, rather seeing it as we're not against medicine, but it's not the only solution. That's the way we should look at it. Because unfortunately, allopathic medicine, which is quite dominant, and we need to be honest that the pharmaceutical companies have a lot of power in modern day, and they are, doing so much marketing and trying to really make us believe that all things should be dealt with medication and with also chemical medication. We actually have the prophetic tip, the prophetic medicine tradition, which is about herbs. Like herbs could be very good in healing a lot of things, and I think that we should combine modern medicine with traditional medicine. Like, we're not against modern medicine, but it should not be the only solution. That's why homeopathy could be very good, or naturopathy, So we need to be very, open for not only finding one solution as the only solution. This is very reductionistic. Yes, medication could be good sometimes. Chemical medication could be, a benefit sometimes, but we also have traditional medicine like the prophetic tip tradition, the Unani trip tradition. The tip and the Unani tip tradition is the Greek Islamic tradition that was established, where a lot of traditional scholars Islamicize some of the Greek medical tradition. It's a very interesting tradition. You also have, for instance, the indigenous approach towards health. Like, if you ask your grandmother and your grandfather, they were experts on which tea you can drink when you're having a sore throat. My grandmother always tells me, if you have a sore throat, eat raw ginger. This is also medicine, by the way. So we need to be open and dynamic and flexible, but root everything in Tawheed, always. Because as we spoke about, primary causation of disease, everything comes from Allah, and the solution comes from Allah. I am a counselor, and as a counselor and as an Islamic psychologist, I am not the one who brings healing to my clients. This is also very problematic, brothers and sisters. We shouldn't call ourselves healers. We're not healers. This is not part of the Islam. This is not part of the Islamic tradition to call ourselves healers or gurus. We're not healers. This is not Islamic tradition. We're not gurus. This is not Islamic tradition. I sometimes see some people using the word, I'm a healer. I'm a Muslim healer. No, you're not. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the healer. we're not the healers. Whether you're a counselor or a physician, you're not the healer. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the healer. We are the vessels of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses us to bring the client into the state of healing. He's the healer. He's al-Shafi'i. We are the vessels. We are his tools. So calling ourselves healers is very problematic. We should be very cautious about that, because then it makes us think that we are the creator. Astaghfirullah adeen. We're not. We are the creation. And we're just working because Allah has given us the tools to do it. He is the healer. So be open and dynamic, but root yourself in the Islamic paradigm and the Islamic psychological, ontological, and epistemological paradigm. And then medication could sometimes be good. In OCD, it's research. And we as Muslims, we believe in research. We believe in empirical research. We're not against it. We just believe that we also have a metaphysical reality that we need to work with as well. All right. Which was the other questions? People are writing the questions directly to me here. So there's another question. What is the difference between ruh and nafs? Ruh is the soul. Nafs could mean the soul, because nafs have different meanings. Nafs can mean the soul, but it could also mean the self, the ego. So it's exchangeable, but in this presentation, I used nafs as the lower self, and ruh is the soul. All right. Mrs. S says that she agrees that medication, talk therapy is the only solution. Yes, I have PTSD plus ADHD and specifically learning difficulties. How can I help myself effectively in Islamic way? Honestly, sister, this is very big questions, and I don't like to just answer them like in one sentence. So with your permission, I refrain from answering them because it's not one-way solution. PTSD, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for you. It's a very complex diagnosis, and there is not one solution to deal with PTSD and ADHD. And ADHD, actually, it's an interesting diagnosis in the sense that, and may Allah make it easy for you. So I'm not going to speak about any solutions today. I can't do it in 1 minute or 2 minutes. It wouldn't be fair, you know. And this is also part of our tradition to sometimes not give any response, honestly. But what I can say with regards to ADHD is about the fact that ADHD doesn't need to be any problem. All right? It doesn't need to be any problem. The problem is the society that doesn't accept people being different. I reiterate myself, dear brothers and sisters. By the way, I don't see anybody. Everybody has closed cameras. Could you open your camera so I can connect with all of you? I don't see anybody. I feel like I'm speaking for myself. So if you feel comfortable, please open up your cameras. At least brothers, all brothers, open up your cameras, please, so I can see you. Because, you know, connection comes from the face as well. We see each other, you know. Alhamdulillah, thank you. At least Ustad Yusuf, I see you. MashaAllah, I see you now. MashaAllah, I see also Ustad Muhammad. MashaAllah, thank you. Salaam alaikum, Sister Yumna. The problem today, brothers and sisters, modernity doesn't accept flexibility, because modernity is a creation of industrialization. What do I mean with that? Industrialization is all about production, and everything needs to be produced according to a certain time frame and certain methodology. All the cars needs to be produced in the same way in the Volkswagen or Toyota factory. Everybody needs to work in the same way. This is not a dynamic system. This is industrialization. And if you have ADHD, maybe you don't fit into that system. Maybe you don't work in that way. And what society is forcing people is you need to be the same. You need to work the same. You need to behave the same. And this creates pathology, because suddenly people have ADHD. People are pathologized. People cannot function because they cannot work according to the industrial view. Before industrialization, have you heard that many people have ADHD? It was not an issue in the sense that the society was more dynamic and flexible. It was not about production. It was also about reflection. It was more dynamic state. You didn't need to produce the same way. Look at the architecture in modernity, brothers and sisters. All the buildings, whether you go to Nairobi or to Stockholm, looks the same. What is the difference of me going to Nairobi now and then go to Stockholm? It's all skyscrapers. It's very boring, by the way. I will be honest. It's the same. In historical societies and civilization, if you go to Nairobi, it's this unique architecture according to your culture. If you go to Mauritania, it's a unique architecture according to your culture. If you come to Stockholm, it's a unique architecture according to that culture. This is the dynamics of flexibility. This is fitri. This is natural. This is fitri. This is natural. This is to be connected with your society and the dynamic of the life. And in this society, people were not pathologized because they had ADHD. They could be themselves and be accepted because it was more dynamic. Our unity historically in the Muslim world came from what? Tawheed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala united all of us. But then, in the way we were different because Allah created us different. This is the beauty of fitri, indigenous, Islamic societies. So ADHD, Sister S. Look at it like that. Allah has given you a gift. You're different than others, and that's beautiful. Many of people that I know that have ADHD, they have a lot of gifts. They're experts in certain things. They have so much knowledge in certain things. I'm quite sure, you know, in the Islamic tradition, brothers and sisters, we have something called Hakim. Hakims were the physicians of our traditional societies, the Hakims. They were the ones who were wise in the knowledge of treating diseases, etc. Many of these Hakims, if they were living in this modern day, people might think that they have pathology. Traditionally, in societies where we met people who might be connected to the unseen in a way that you and I are not, we were seeing them as people that were gifted with something, and we made them into leaders of society. Today, because we don't believe in because the metaphysicality is not part of the fabric of the society, we pathologize people who might have connection to other realms than what we have. This is the problem with modernity, and it's this disconnection with spirituality. So this is my way of reflecting upon ADHD. I'm very much aware that ADHD is a real thing. A lot of people have problems with concentration. And of course, there are practices we can do to help out, to bring ease to that. But that's something that I would like to speak about another day. I do work with ADHD as a counselor, but this is also my view that ADHD could also be a talent and a gift. Like everything could be a gift as well. It doesn't mean that I don't see that there's reasons that we work with neurodiversity, because there is a reason why we have neurodiversity. And we need to work with that. We need to acknowledge that. We need to be inclusive. Not all people read the same way. Not all people think the same way. Not all people talk the same way. And the biggest problem is that the society wants everybody to be the same. That's why we need to work with neurodiversity from an Islamic point of view and see how we can address these issues, inshallah. When it comes to trauma, there is a lot of research historically of how to deal with trauma. Many of the Tasawwuf scholars spoke about trauma and how to deal with it. Ibn Ajiba, for instance, is one of the great scholars from Morocco who spoke about dealing with trauma and trials and tribulations. But that's for another lecture. And we can utilize a lot of these works and bring it into, you know, how to work with post-traumatic growth. But I can't speak more about it now because we have too little time, inshallah. May Allah make it easy for you, sister. Jazakallah khairan for your questions and reflections. Any other questions, Sister Yumna?
Yes, brother, there is one more. Do we have Islamic theories in psychology?
Do we have what?
Do we have Islamic theories? Islamic theories
Do we have Islamic theories? What does that mean?
in
I don't know.
psychology?
Islamic psychology is rooted in Islamic theory. So Islamic psychology is rooted in Quran and Sunnah. So all the disciplines that shape Islamic psychology is rooted in Quran and Sunnah, whether it's fiqh or whether it's tib or whether it's tasawwuf or akhlaq, that shape the field is rooted in Quran and Sunnah. So Islamic psychology is Islamic theory because it's about understanding the reality of the soul, the science of the soul from an Islamic paradigm, which is rooted in Quran and Sunnah. So yes, Islamic psychology is Islamic theory. But of course, I mean, Islamization of knowledge per se is not, it's not derived from an indigenous approach. Nevertheless, it's about Islamicizing it so it's congruent with the Quran and Sunnah. And then it's actually congruent with the primary sources. So even Islamization becomes congruent, and then it's connected to Quran and Sunnah. You see what I'm saying? It doesn't start from there, but then it becomes connected when you Islamicize the process, which is the process that Professor Najati spoke about, or Sheikh Al-Atas or Sheikh Al-Faruqi. I hope that answered the question. I didn't understand the question, but I'm sure it's a very important. Okay, do you have theories in psychology? You mean different theories? Yes, of course. There is a lot of different. I shed some information from some of the theories. For instance, child psychology from an Islamic psychological point of view is something that Imam Al-Tabari spoke a lot about. You can have cognitive behavior therapy from an Islamic psychological point of view. That's one thing that Abu Zayd al-Balkhi spoke about. So yes, there are different theories in the field of Islamic psychology. In this modern era, we have scholars who are working with Islamic psychology from different approaches. So you have many scholars that are, working with Islamic psychology. Of course, all of it is rooted in Quran and Sunnah, but they have different approaches. So you have, for instance, I refer to Dr. Rothman, you have Professor Rasool, you have Dr. Keshavarzi, you have Dr. Awad, you have Dr. Bagus, and many other great scholars. And that's the same with the tradition, by the way. Many of the traditional scholars, they were all rooted in Quran and Sunnah, but then they had different approaches of understanding or dealing with the spiritual diseases, or the psychological diseases. So this is the beauty of multiplexity, unity in Quran and Sunnah and Tawheed, multiplexity in different approaches. Any other questions, brothers and sisters? All right, I think that's it, right? SubhanAllah, we've been having this meeting for 2 hours now. So thank you so much, everyone. I'm very honored to be with all of you. Please forgive me for the shortcoming. This lecture needs at least 3 hours, and also it's a part 2 and part 3. So inshallah, we will do part 2 and part 3 later on. So yes, Sister Yumna, please take over. I'm just going to say, I'm so excited that we're establishing ISIP's Kenyan chapter, and I'm really looking forward to work with you, Sister Yumna. You have so much knowledge yourself, and Ustad Yusuf, I'm looking forward to work with somebody who is a Raqi. How can we combine the knowledge that we have as clinicians with the knowledge you have as a spiritual leader? This is really the interdisciplinary approach that I believe in, Ustad Yusuf. I believe that the imams and the clergy should work with the psychologists together for the well-being of our community, So many of the local imams where I live, they refer clients to me when they feel like it's beyond their scope. And when it comes to fit-related questions or, questions that has to do with ruqya, I send them to the imam. So I work very closely with the imams. And actually in the task force, one of the task forces in ISIP, we're trying to create a project where we want to educate imams in counseling and psychology, and the imams will educate us in the traditional Islamic disciplines like Sharia, for instance, right? We work together. Of course, as a counselor, you need to know at least Fard al-Ain. This is very important. But beyond that, you don't need to have all that knowledge. You can have that by collaborating with the trained imam who has ijazah, and then we combine it with our knowledge. So we need to work interdisciplinary. Sister Yumna, Ustad Yusuf, and rest of our members here. It's very important to work close with the imams, and the imams should work close with the mental health professionals, and then we can train ourselves in Islamic psychology as well. So I'm really looking forward to work with Ustad Yusuf and other clergies as well, inshallah, because I really think that we can benefit from each other. Honestly, it's very important because we need each other. I always tell my clients, I'm not an imam. I'm not. I'm an Islamic psychologist. I can work with certain things, other things the imam works with. You see, so we work together. So that's why we need to educate ourselves. What is the role of the Islamic psychologist? Because we know the role of the imam. Well, what is the role of the Islamic psychologist? It's a complementary role. It's kind of like being a chaplain, right? We have chaplaincy in the UK. So it's similar to that, the Islamic psychologists, in the sense that we're working with certain things and we have training in certain things. But we're not faqih, we're not a faqih, or a faqihah. That's the realm of Ustad Yusuf and other religious scholars. And I'm looking forward to work with you, Ustad, and all other alim and alimas, by the way, and all other mental health professionals. And also do not denounce, mainstream education. I am not against it. So when you listen to my lecture, don't think that I'm against mainstream psychology. I'm just saying that they don't have the solution only. We have the solution, but there is wisdom in all traditions as long as we filter it according to Quran and Sunnah. That's the thing. And I think Islamic psychology can deal with the problems of modernity. Inshallah. A lot of the diseases of modernity, we have the solution in our tradition. So I'm very excited to establish ISIP's Kenyan chapter under the leadership of our excellent sister Yumna, Ustad Yusuf, and rest of the excellent team. I want to thank you all for joining, and I will pass the microphone up to Sister Yumna and Ustad Yusuf to end. Jazakallah khairan for having me, and I'm really looking forward to support all of you. And let's have an international conference in Kenya soon, inshallah, where we will invite, Islamic psychologists and students and practitioners and scholars all over the world into the beautiful country of Kenya. And I'm looking forward to come there and share this event with all of you, inshallah. Barakallahu feekum. May Allah grant tawfiq to all of us. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much, Brother Jamaluddin. It's been great to have you together with us. I'm grateful to all of you also who have joined in together for this session today. Alhamdulillah, Jazakallahu khairan to everyone. And also, Jazakallahu khairan to Brother Jamaluddin, giving us time, giving us the very enlightened session when it comes to introduction to Islamic psychology. Alhamdulillah, thank you so much. Barakallahu feek. And inshallah, as we are now ending our session, I would like to call upon Brother Yusuf Ali Osman, please. He can, for some supplication, please. Yeah, thank you.
Sister, just one thing. I'm writing my email in the chat just because some people asked, and I will write my WhatsApp number. It's fine. People can write to me. And if you have any question with ISIP Kenya, reach out to Sister Yumna and Ustad Yusuf and rest of the team. And when it comes to international questions, you can reach out to me. I will refer you to right people. And also, somebody were asking about dealing with trials and tribulations and understanding good and bad. So there are great works I will share. One with Ibn Taymiyyah. He speaks a lot about, the notion of good and bad and how to deal with it. Amazing, works from Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimullah. And also Imam Ghazali has a lot of works on that as well. And that could be good to, utilize when you speak about post-traumatic growth, for instance, to understand this. So Ibn Taymiyyah's work and Imam Ghazali's work, I will share them with people if they just write to me on WhatsApp, inshallah. So I'm just answering some questions I got private here. Barakallah feek, sister. Yes, Ustad Yusuf, please.
Thank you very much, Brother Jamal. It's been an honor to have you on board in the Kenyan chapter, and we are really excited to have this the workshop we've had today, and inshallah we're looking forward to more engagements with you and the rest of the team and in the international community also. It's very important, the point you talked about religious leaders collaborating or cooperating with the psychologists, and it's very important because this is a gap which needs to be filled. This a gap which affects all the field of psychology, the field of theology. So when we have this cooperation, it will help us a lot. It will help us a lot because the rabbis, the religious leaders, the scholars will combine together, will come together with the other psychologists and other practitioners so as to come up with a holistic model so as to be able to help the international community in every corner of the world. So this is very important, and inshallah we'll be working together, and we're looking forward to having you here. Just as you said that this will be an international conference which will be organized, inshallah. We'll be happy to be part of that. For now, I think we'll close with prayers, and inshallah, Allah may give us tawfiq in everything. اللهم ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم واعف عنا إنك أنت عفو كريم واهدنا إلى دين الحق ولا طريق مستقيم. اللهم احفظنا من جميع البلاء والقضاء ما هلك من شر الأعداء ومن شر ما خلق بين السماء والأرض. اللهم اجعل جمعنا هذا جمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا من بعده مؤيدا معصوما. اللهم ألف بين قلوبنا وأصلح ذات بيننا واهدنا سبل السلام ونجنا من الظلمات إلى النور وجنبنا الفواحش ما ظهر منها وبطن وبارك لنا في أسماعنا وأبصارنا وقلوبنا وأزواجنا وذرياتنا وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. رب زدنا علما وارزقنا فهما واجعلنا من الفائزين. سبحانك اللهم لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والحمد لله رب العالمين.
شكرا.
الحمد لله رب العالمين. جزاك الله خيرا brother Yusuf Ali Osman.